Today, I'd like to just talk a little bit with you about a subject that is in the media. It's hot, it's heavy, it's a subject that everybody's talking about, and that's the immigration problem that we're having, certainly down on our southern borders. And so I have entitled this conversation, it's not a sermon, this conversation, the immigration debate and the Bible. It is a subject that we're all concerned about, and as I said before, we've heard a lot about it. But what's really correct here? Who's really right? I think that a lot of the media, as well as some of our congressmen today and congresswomen, have pushed some buttons to make us feel guilty for perhaps not being more involved. And so I thought it was a subject that was worthwhile me sharing my opinion anyway. And so let me begin by reading to you a couple of things here that I think are important, a couple of oaths. So let me begin by reading the oath of office for the president. And I quote, "I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States." Let me read to you, end of quote, let me read to you now the oath of office for a congressperson. I do, and I quote, "I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support, defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this oath, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservations or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of this office on which I am about to enter. So help me God." End of quote. It talks about, in both of these oaths of office, the Constitution. The president says, his oath says that he will faithfully execute the office of the President of the United States and to the best of his ability preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. A congressperson's oath is, "I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America." The first thing I want to point out to you here is that their allegiance is to the United States of America, not to Japan, not to China, not to Russia, not to England, not to our friends on our southern borders or our northern borders for that matter. But they've made a commitment and an allegiance to the Constitution of the United States of America. Well, the Constitution is a piece of paper, but who is what is the people of the United States of America? Who are they? So just a little background. The Constitution was written in 1787, and it was ratified in 1788, and it's been in operation since 1789. Here's a little truth, a wonderful truth. The United States Constitution is the world's longest surviving written charter of government. And its first three words, the first three words in the Constitution of the United States is, "We the people." Now, I'm not sure who wrote this. When I took this off the internet, they didn't say who wrote it. They didn't give them credit for it. But I want you to know I didn't write this. So it says the first three words in the Constitution is, "We the people." Well, let me ask you a question. Who's the people? Who are they talking about? They're talking about Americans, people who were born here, people who have legally come here, taken the necessary classes, and taken that oath to the Constitution of the United States. Listen to what this individual writes here. "We the people end of quote, affirms that the government of the United States exists to serve its citizens. Did you hear that? That the government of the United States of America exists to serve its citizens. The Constitution was written on the behalf of the people. Now, that's important. It's important that we understand this. Leaders of this country have pledged their allegiance to the people of this country. They haven't pledged their allegiance to anyone else. We have been, some of us anyway, I haven't. Let me rephrase that. Let me not say that let me say it like this. There are those out here, and I said this a little earlier, who have endeavored to make you and I feel guilty for not doing more for our neighbors on the southern border. We have laws in this nation. And where there's no laws, then what do we've got? We've got just a mob. The leaders have pledged their allegiance to the people of this country, not to a mob, but to a nation. Now, let me use an illustration here, because this is immigration, the immigration debate in the Bible. So now, let's just take a look at Israel. When Israel came out of Egypt, let me tell you something. It was a mob. It was a mob. All it had was a God that they weren't even sure about. All right? They murmured and complained because they got to the water and the water was bitter. They accused Moses of bringing them out there so they could all die, including their little ones. Said, you're not feeding us, there's no water. Israel came out of Egypt, they were a mob. They had no laws, they had no laws that governed them, they had no moral laws, they had nothing. There was just 1 million plus bike riders, if I could say it like that, riding through the wilderness, through the desert. But when they came out of the wilderness, some 40 years later, they were a nation. They had rules and regulations, they had laws, they knew who their God was, they had an army, they had the necessary things that was required, to be a nation. There are consequences for breaking the laws. There are consequences for breaking. If a nation has laws, then I want you to know there should be consequences for breaking those laws. Now, I'm going to talk about myself. Excuse me a minute. Let me get a little water here. Because if I talk about myself, it's not gossiping. But listen to what I'm about to say to you, because it's extremely important. So my family has picked this country's cotton, fought its wars. World War I, my father fought. Vietnam, I fought. And my son has done 2 tours in Afghanistan. So my family has picked this country's cotton, fought its wars, and paid its taxes. Now here's the question. Name for me one law that me and my family can break. We can't speed down the highway, we'll get a ticket. If we go rob a bank and say, but I'm a vet, they're going to say, tough, you're just going to be a vet in the penitentiary. Why is it okay for someone else to come into this nation and break the laws and get away with it? They get a pat on the back. How come the vet today doesn't get a pat on the back? I'm using the vet because they paid the ultimate price. They have fought for the nation. And those that didn't go into combat was certainly mentally and emotionally and physically ready to fight on the behalf of this nation. Whenever I go to the VA hospital, I'm reminded of the price that these vets have paid. I saw a young man, it couldn't have been no more than, I'm going to say 25. I don't think he was 25. He had one leg. One leg was gone. And I'm assuming he lost that leg in the Middle East somewhere. So the moment anyone crosses into the borders of the United States illegally, they have broken the law. My question to you is, why is it that they get a pat on the back? Now listen to what I'm about to say to you. An illegal alien is not responsible to anyone, nor is this government responsible for them. This government has sworn an allegiance to the citizens of the United States of America, and therefore it has made itself responsible to the citizens. An illegal alien comes into this country, and I don't care where they come from. I don't care if they come from Mars. The government is not responsible for their well-being, but here's the scary thing. They're not responsible to this government. They're not responsible for the laws, to obey the laws, the principles and the precepts that have been established over the years. And that should concern you. That should make your hair rise a little bit. Think about it a moment. Here's the other thing. I said to you that my family has fought this country's wars and paid its taxes. There's only one way to pay taxes. You got to work. You can't work off the books, because if you're working off the books, you're not paying taxes. I'm retired. And I get my Social Security. I'm 70 years old. But I pay tax on my Social Security. Now, maybe I didn't pay tax on it when I was putting it in there. I don't know. But I pay tax. I know you're saying to yourself right now, well, Abe, where is your compassion? And you're saying, oh, aren't you concerned about the refugee? You bet you I'm concerned. But let me tell you what my mother used to say. My mother used to say, charity begins at home. My responsibility was to feed my family. My responsibility was to the wife that I married and the children that she bore for me. If my neighbor needed something and I had it to spare, absolutely I would give it to them. But they were not my responsibility. Let me tell you something, America. Whether you agree with me or not, I'm right. Our charity, our responsibility begins, number one, with the American that is homeless today, with the American that is fatherless today, with that person that is poor, that widow. America is not the breadbasket of the world. It is not. Now, you say, well, Brother Abe, you don't understand. Let me tell you something. I do understand. I grew up in a very poor home. My mama cleaned houses, and the money wasn't always there for food. There were many a day that I went to school, me and my siblings, and we were hungry. And let me tell you something. We got free lunch, and it was so embarrassing. There were days I wouldn't even go in there and get the token. But America did its best by us. We got commodities back then. Got rice and cheese and I think flour and butter. There wasn't no food stamps. Thank God for food stamps. But it's for the American. It's not for the foreigner. They have my heartfelt compassion. But I am not, and nor are you, America, responsible for those that are camping on our southern border. So who's responsible for them? The governments from which they've come. The governments from which they have come. You say, well, where is that in the Bible? Well, let me read something to you. I try to tell people that when you read the Bible, you need to look for principles. Principles that are applicable to life situations and circumstances. Principles that we can apply to our lives. So let me read to you and hopefully make sense to you. So this is David. This is when God sent Samuel down to, let me use a term that you can appreciate, down to appoint David as Israel's future king. He anointed him, but what he was really doing was appointing him as Israel's future king. So I'm reading to you from 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 13. So as David stood there among his brothers, Samuel took the flash of olive oil he had brought and anointed David with the oil. And the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David from that day on. And then Samuel returned to Ramah. So Samuel went home. Now listen to what it says here in 2 Samuel chapter 4. Is that where I want to go? Chapter 5, I'm sorry, verse 12. Listen to what this says here. And David realized that the Lord had confirmed him as king, or established him as king over Israel, and had blessed his kingdom or his administration for the sake of his people Israel. David realized that God had established him as king, had established his administration, not for David's sake, not so that David could be, king and lorded over the people, but for the people's sake. God raised up and established and placed in office a man that would be concerned about God's people. What makes you think that the way business is done today, it should be any different than it was being done in David's day? The present administration, the past administrations, and the future administrations are responsible to the people and for the people of these United States and no one else. Until next time, may God bless you and may God keep you. Tell somebody about the station, and thank you for watching.